And I'm never, ever one to blame a ref, to blame an official. I could say we could have done more, but this is getting out of hand. You know, there have been games like this that we've won. There have been games like this that we've lost. But this whole refereeing stuff and the way we're nice, we don't complain, we don't get frustrated. You know, we fight through things. And the fact that we just continually get screwed in a way by this. You know, like we won this game. You know what I mean? We have a whole second half of the season to go and get ready for, but like I'm sick of it. To be honest with you, we all are. You know, and I think this is something that just it eats me. It eats at me, man. And I don't y'all know what it is. We all know what it is, but it's really getting out of hand. It's really, really, really getting out of hand. And the league needs to do something about this.
Last night's Jazz-Sixers game gave us a little bit of everything, from playoff intensity to crazy shot making to some terrible refereeing. And it's worth highlighting the key matchups and strategic decisions down the stretch to get an understanding of whether these two teams really are the best of their respective conferences, as their records suggest. But in the end, we need to go through some of these calls to figure out how and why we got one of the worst refed games this season. The main event saw the matchup between Joel Embiid on offense and Rudy Gobert on defense, and it went 15 rounds with a lot of interesting back and forth. Obviously, when the player puts up 40 points on 52% shooting, you have to give the title to him, but not every shot Embiid took was while Rudy was guarding him. Where Gobert has the most trouble is when Embiid attacks out top off the dribble. Rudy doesn't have the lateral mobility to keep up with the kind of dexterity Joel can hit him with on this turnaround Dirk leg. In the second half, the Sixers went to their Embiid ball screening package a lot, which forces Rudy to deal with two players at once, and he does get there with a hand up, but it's a 13-footer in the lane. The inside ball screen doesn't compromise the defense. The pocket pass goes back outside the lane, but Embiid can hit this jump shot often. However, if you review the tape, he hit a couple of these while torturing Derek Favors with shot fakes before putting it up and over him, but Rudy had done a good job on his contests, and since he's longer, had a more profound effect on the shot as they bounce off the rim. But on this one, Embiid uses that jump shot threat with another fake that gets Rudy way out of position as Joel throws it down to cut the lead in the fourth. The Sixers also took advantage of Gobert's propensity for drifting into the lane to help his teammates, as the easy kickout leaves Embiid with several feet of space to size up the shot before dropping it through for the lead. The Sixers get that same inside ball screen on the right side, and Rudy was better at keeping in front of Embiid in the drive. But he can't give up this much ground to such a strong player, as the first contest worked, but the tip-in gets Philly another tie. On the Jazz side of things, of course the headline is that Donovan Mitchell dropped 33, but it wasn't very efficient, and he let the frustration of the game get to him when the referees ejected him from the game for saying some unsavory things. The X factor for the Jazz last night was Joe Ingles, who had by far the highest plus-minus and leads me to advocate more playing time than the 25 minutes he got in this game. He did most of his damage out of the pick and roll, where his full assortment of cleverness was on display. Attacking Dwight Howard to his left, Ingles knows what a threat Rudy is as the roll man this close, and uses the nice pass fake into a shot to get separation before the defense can react. Watch how Rudy shapes up to set the inside ball screen back to Ingles' right. He sees how out of position Embiid is to protect the basket and rejects the screen, then lifts up off the left foot and scoops this up and in with the left hand, quick releasing this before Embiid ever had a chance to block it. His funky two-motion three-point shot has always been a bit of a curiosity, but he's proven to be an elite shooter with that form, and it helps him immensely to be able to go to his right, where the left hip and elbow are more easily aligned to the hoop, and check how he likes to scissor his legs in the air on the way down to land split foot. For him, a self-organizing principle for maintaining proper alignment throughout the whole shot. Scanning the five-man lineups of the Jazz, it's the fourth most played with Ingles in for Conley that has done serious damage and should get more playing time, meaning Ingles should average closer to 30 minutes a game instead of his 26 he's getting now. But this is where the wheels started to fall off the cart for the referees, and I had to bring in Ronnie Nunn to help me break down some of these calls. Ronnie was an NBA referee for 19 years, head of officials for 5 years, and director of development for 3 more, so he knows what he's talking about. Well, Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on the show today and breaking this down. I think Utah Jazz fans really need some insight, some help, and you're the man to do it.
Well, thank you, Coach Nick. I'm glad to be here with you. Let's talk about it. What do we got?
Well, the first clip we have is Embiid, doing a face-up move toward the basket against Gobert with the 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. There's an awful lot of contact, some maybe a notion of dislodging, perhaps, of Gobert. What do you think happened on this play and whether a whistle should have been blown?
Well, you know what it is? If Embiid would have continued his straight line and kept Gobert to the side and went up, he might have got a contact for a defensive foul. But what Embiid does is there's this unique offensive foul where all of a sudden you notice the contact is not at the sternum because Embiid changes his direction and now takes out Gobert. When a player does that, especially in the sophistication of NBA refereeing, that's recognized as an offensive foul. He gets in between the shoulder and Gobert's sternum. It's not at the sternum. It's inside of it. And when you dislodge someone like that, that's an offensive foul in the NBA. And I hate when it goes back to only perpendicular action. The NBA is too sophisticated for that, and that's because the players are too sophisticated, and you've got to recognize that this is a clear out.
For sure. And that perpendicular notion or movement you were describing is, you don't need to be standing completely straight up and down, arms up over your head to draw a charge. You have your legal guarding position. You can't get dislodged. Which is where we're going to bring us to now, because at the end, after this play unfolded, we have a fast break by the Philadelphia down by 3, 32 seconds left to go. A beautiful, beautiful anticipation by Royce O'Neal to deflect the ball and save it. It seemed pretty clearly, in the air. So can you walk us through what happens on this save and why it ultimately was reviewed and then awarded back to Philadelphia?
Well, you know what? For all intents and purposes, when I saw this play, I said, well, this is an easy play. Everybody's got to be thinking, did he release prior to coming down? And, even in real time, you can see that release. Okay, great. It's under 2 minutes. We're going to go look at it anyway. And you see that. What happens is, I understand now, as somebody feeds in information, which is obviously one referee to the next, and says, look, the ball hit me first before the Jazz player ever got to it. Okay, so what does that mean? That means I was out of bounds, guys. And if I'm out of bounds, I'm part of the floor. And if the ball hits me, it's already out of bounds before the Jazz player gets to it.
Game clock is reset to 29.1. Ruling on the floor is Philly's ball. The call on the floor stands.
Without question, with the new replays, which take a long time now and everyone gets all antsy, I think it's imperative on the referee to explain a little bit more in detail what happens in a play like this. And it would have probably tamped down a lot of the anxiety of the Jazz fans because, the rule we know, and oftentimes people scream, it hits the referee. He is part of the floor, right? That is the rule. No, and wherever he is on the floor, if he's on it or not, that's as if the ball had hit the actual ground.
Yeah, and actually, I've had plays in my career where the referee got hit with the ball and saved the ball from going out of bounds because he was in bounds when it hit him. So it's all good. Let's play on.
Well, it didn't get any better for Jazz fans as we got into overtime. We have a shot by Donovan Mitchell in the corner. This has been a thing that's been going on this year and hasn't necessarily been addressed, and I think we need to. That's why I wanted to bring it up because by the letter of the law, I think, Ronnie, you're going to agree with me, when there's contact like this with a shooter, he gets awarded the free throws in the act of shooting, despite the fact that it's not a quote-unquote natural shooting motion and no one would ever try and shoot a jump shot that way. What do you feel about this? Do you think that we should change this rule and somehow figure out a better way to adjudicate it?
Well, I think the play is a tough play because, as you know from all the basketball that we were all involved in, there are times when the EuroLeague and the Europe and FIBA has talked about the cylinder of players. Are you in each other's cylinder? And I think it's kind of a formidable thing to discuss. The issue is that when somebody comes halfway out, we have plays where a shooter is going to lure closer to the basket contact, and he's right to do that. We see that pretty clearly as a foul. When it's out on the perimeter, it's really open to say, hey, this guy kind of moved over to get that contact. I think this is a tweener play, and when he comes out, he's half in the cylinder, half out of the cylinder of his own body, and the player coming against him is almost in the same boat. I would probably call a defensive foul on the play. You can, if you want to be more strict on it, say, listen, you can only go straight up on the perimeter, and that's how we're going to interpret that contact, that would be a good thing to start talking about. But at the time, I think we have it as is. He comes out slight. I mean, he doesn't really come out. It's like Reggie Miller's leg. He doesn't really throw it out. So in this case, he doesn't really throw his body out, which should be a no call or an offensive foul if you wanted to. That would be an interesting offensive foul, and it would be right to do. But in this case, it's half and half. Each one is kind of in a bad spot, and you go with the shooter.
I agree on this one particularly. It wasn't really one of the more egregious ones where we've seen guys launch themselves laterally, feet to get over and get contact. So this one, but it's definitely worth a conversation, and we need to figure out maybe a way, like we've discussed, like they've instituted the kicking your leg out being an offensive foul. Maybe there's something there, but I mean, I wouldn't envy any ref's job to have to try and figure out what's happening on those kind of plays if it becomes a rule where they have to really figure that out. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. And by the way, I still think it's a defensive foul because, again, each one is caught up in each one's cylinder. It's like an overlapping cylinder. I think you go with the shooter on this one.
For sure. Well, now it brings us to the main event, the one play everybody wants to hear you talk about and us go through, because this was the key one with Utah down by 1 and 2 minutes to go in overtime. Remember, tensions were high on the Jazz side already from the referees' calls. We have an attempt to put the defender in jail, and Simmons wasn't having it. He was really sliding over to get in front of Donovan Mitchell. They called this an offensive foul on the spin. We have a lot of things involved here because the timing of the whistle doesn't necessarily relate to exactly when the foul occurred. So walk us through this one, Ronnie, and let us know what you think happened and whether it was a good call.
Well, you know what? The good news is that, and people should know, that the timing of a whistle, as you just said, doesn't mean anything. It's the processing of the official to see the play more fully. And when he begins to see it more fully, that's when he reacts. So that's a good thing. The problem here is that there's a camera angle kind of missing for us. And also, I'm looking at Simmons. I don't see him trying to get to the Donovan Mitchell's right side. In other words, maybe to flick a ball or something. So he's caught up in pretty good defensive positioning. So when Donovan turns into him and scoops up a shot under him, I'm thinking maybe somebody wants a travel violation, or maybe Simmons comes down and chops the little scoop shot arm. I don't see an offensive foul. And in all fairness, there's that one little piece that's missing. But if this was all I had, I would probably say there's not enough offensive foul here to me. Unless we have an overt clamp. And on an overt clamp, I would have liked for him to respond sooner.
I just don't understand. So here's what the argument is for the Jazz or the Sixers fans is Mitchell's left arm, because on a normal hook, he would be spinning like to the baseline. The left arm would get on the out, like around the player, maybe grab the inside of his knee. Like that's what a hook is, with a bent arm and kind of pulling him by him to get around. We don't see, I can't even find maybe one frame where you could see his left arm sort of out in that area, but it would be almost impossible anatomically for him to have kind of bent the arm and sort of grabbed part of the knee and been a provocative hook like that. So I can't follow that at all, and it was certainly not to any kind of advantage because it would have been so fast. And then on the spin, I mean, it looks pretty obvious here that we have Ben Simmons clamping down on that left arm. I would have almost said just let it go. Let him have the spin move and let the ball, though, especially in this situation here. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that because actually when he's pulling away to do this spin move into a scoop shot, it looks like he's trying to get his left arm released from something or somebody. And it looks like there's a pull on there. So, maybe the official's going, geez, if I'm going to call a defensive hold on a scoop from this side of the body, then I should go with what happened first. So I don't know, again, what we have first. But this is a very hard play to determine at this angle.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the last play we have in this game that we can go through, which is an offensive rebound by Joel Embiid, and then a putback, and then a foul called on Gobert. The reaction was pretty, a lot of histrionics going on by the Jazz. What do you see here, though? Was this a legit call?
Well, here's the situation. I don't think this particular part of the sequence is legit. The second put-up shot by Embiid with Gobert's arm. Gobert's forearm has been on that body throughout the first and second shot attempt. So you're looking for now Gobert to really push him. You're really looking for him to go elbow to wrist to disallow this dunk. I think what's happening here is the officials are looking at Embiid instead of looking at Gobert. And that's one of the critical things in officiating. You can't look at the offensive player because they will lure you into thinking something happened. Now, why he didn't get a dunk up there, I don't know. But I don't see Gobert moving him out of the way that badly. What I do see is if you look at the play prior to that on Simmons' tip-in, Gobert's arm does go against Simmons, and actually Simmons may embellish a little by going to the floor. That's the foul.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to take you further back. If you're really going to talk about travels, Embiid does a travel on his spin move by lifting his right foot. That's the official furthest away could have killed that play right then and said that's a travel, because it is. He up fakes and then he uses the same right foot to step closer to the hoop to get to this position of this post up, drop step spin move to the hoop. So there's a couple of things that happened before this play, and when you're a referee, you go, "Geez, I could have nailed it here. Geez, I should have nailed it there." And all of a sudden, you get one that's kind of questionable, and now you have the whistle on it, and it really bothers you because there were things in the sequence which were fair to whistle, and we didn't do it.
Right, great catch on the Tobias Harris spin move on Bogdanovich and lifting that pivot foot up and then putting it back down. I missed that too. Wow, great call on that one. I do believe that the Simmons, there's a lot of contact on that Simmons tip-in as well that didn't call. And we're getting to that moment where, the fans like to assume that there's no calls down there in this time of the game when it's not true. We've shown that over and over again. I will disagree with you though, Ronnie. I do feel like he's in the air, and there is enough of a shove. When you're in the air, you're very vulnerable to little bits of things here. It's an old vet trick. I think the baseline camera shows Rudy knows how to kind of at certain angles, and maybe the referee can't quite see that in the baseline from where he's standing. But I don't know. I'm thinking that there's enough there that it was worthy of a call.
Well, you know what? I couldn't say no, because we're talking about something that's going to tip the scales. It's like a 52-48. If you see, when you get to 55-45, you got to acquiesce. So I think it's close, and I couldn't argue with you that we should call the foul. I think the problem is that follows with Donovan Mitchell and the disappointment of all of a sudden four players of the Jazz are all upset. They all spin around and lift their legs, and they're all upset in their arms about the play because the sequence of the plays are looking that they're not addressed. And so when the final play comes up that looks like the least of the issues, they're like, geez, we can't catch a break. And this is what makes people think that something's in line against them. It really is. It's the competency of the officiating at certain times. And this is a key time in the game. You got to be very good throughout the game, practicing wise, because these times in the game it comes up, and that's when you got to throw a strike. You got to throw strikes with the bases loaded. Bases loaded in NBA basketball is the last 2 minutes.
Well, Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on and breaking down all these plays for us. I think that the Jazz fans might feel a little bit better about all these things now that we've gone through it. Maybe not, I don't know. But it's always useful to have you break these things down, explain to us exactly what happened and why.
Well, you know what? The fans are great referees, and I want to lure them into knowing that this part of the game is worth them knowing about as well as they learn from basketball offenses and defenses and talented. There is talent in officiating. It is a hard job, but it is an organized job, and there's a system of principles you got to follow in order to get plays right. And fans need to learn about those. And when we're wrong, and but the majority of times, more than the majority of times, we're right. And there's certain reasons why we are right.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and breaking that down. And thank you all for joining us as well. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Ronnie?
Always in with you, Coach. Always in.
It's worth going through the end of this game because we had ourselves another foul or defend when up by 3 situation. But this one was tough since there was so much time left in the game. Normally, I'd say you have to foul up by 3, but only if there's less than 10 seconds left in the game. The crucial part of this handoff out top is that it forces the switch, even though it seems like there was a second here when they could have tried to quickly switch back. As a result, the Jazz narrowly avoid having a foul called on them, and with over 11 seconds left and Philly with the timeout remaining, you don't want to take it just yet. But in an improbable move, and one that should have been anticipated, Embiid suddenly dribbles from the post to behind the arc. Once he's facing the basket like this, you cannot foul because of the risk of giving up 3 free throws. Huge props to Embiid for cold swishing this clutch basket to somehow tie the game. Now, the Jazz have 2 timeouts left, and I get it. You want to catch the defense out of position, but that's a lot less likely off a made basket, and it leads directly to the shot I absolutely hate the most in the NBA, the Mike Conley right-handed floater. I've proven in the past how he doesn't always make it, and in fact, he's usually below average when shooting with that offhand. And while it almost goes in, I can't help but wonder what would have happened had they called timeout with plenty of time to run a good set and get a great shot or draw a foul. As it turned out, Tobias Harris was too much to handle in the overtime, and after missing this three-point shot without any possibility of drawing the foul from Simmons, Donovan Mitchell had had enough and made sure to say something awful to the referee that got him kicked out of the game as the Sixers went on to grit out a tough win. For the Jazz, this shows they're not quite ready to be on the main stage of the NBA. By letting the referees get to them to this degree cannot happen in the playoffs if they want to go far. And hopefully for Jazz fans, they'll learn from this game, add some maturity and growth, and come out better for it.